building trust and transparency with proper consent management and preference management. We want to talk with you today a bit about the concept of privacy-led marketing, on why trust and transparency is important, and how you solve that in detail with proper consent management. And then looking a little bit into the overall privacy journey. So stay tuned, will be an interesting topic. We do have a bit of interaction. There's a QR code, and we will have this multiple times on the slides. So please feel free to scan the QR code and then help us to give some interesting answers to some questions. And let's start with the first one. What do you think? How long does it take for someone when visiting a website on getting a first impression? Do we have some answers? It's actually pretty interesting. It is 0.05 seconds to get a first impression. Just think about this number. This is like, we talked about this yesterday. It's like, I don't know, hard to understand what happens in 0.05 seconds. And what does usually happen when you enter a website? You see a consent banner, which is legal requirement, everybody's implementing it, and it's super, super important that this is very good, fitting to your brand, building the right trust level, so that you have a good first impression, because otherwise you already lost the customer. So if you have a cookie banner or not having a cookie banner, this is defining what the customer thinks. Or if you have a bad consent banner, that is not building trust, that is not building the bridge to your brand, you will lose a lot of trust in the first 0.05 seconds. So that's why this matters. And why does it matter to build up trust with your customer and with your users going to your website or application? It's important because a lot of users are acting very differently based on the trust level they have to your brand. If you look into customers buying new products, 63% are rather buying new products if they trust the brand. If they don't, they would not. 55 stay loyal to you. So if you have a high trust level, the customer does shop with your brand and is not going to other brands. And 53 are recommending your product, going to their friends and colleagues and recommending using this product because it has a higher level of trust and they think that their data is safe with you. And also for apps, 81% of customers trust you as a brand if they have a positive privacy experience. And the other way around, you would lose the customers. So that's why it's super, super important to start with the first impressions and build up the right trust level to get the right customers and keep them on board. And how did this work in the past? When we look into the last couple of years, or basically the last decade, data was always something that you wanted to have. And you wanted to have all the data. You didn't really know why, but you wanted to have all of it. So track as much as possible was the main idea. And we have a lot of this data, and we are not using it to the full extent. And on the other side, if you look into consumers are starting to want to get trust and want to see what are you doing with the data? What do I get in return for sharing my data with you? And are you taking it seriously? Are you sharing it with third parties? What is happening? There's a lot of questions on why do I see something on my phone the next day when I visited a website without ever consenting to do that. So there's more awareness on the consumer side, and they demand that you handle it properly. So basically, you need to find the middle layer. So you want to find the right data, but you also want to respect users' choices. And that's exactly in the middle of the two. So what this means is it's not data versus privacy. It is the middle and using it to get a better conversion in the end and better campaign performance with your customer. Coming to a second question here. We have 3 questions prepared for you with a few numbers. So the first question is around how many % of consumers are more open to grant permission if they know what the data is used for, if it's transparent, and if they have the feeling that it's secure. What do you think? What is the number behind this scale here? And the second question will be, consumers say that knowing a company's privacy policy before making a purchase is important. So how many % of customers think this is important? And the third one is, consumers only make online purchases or using digital services after making sure the companies are known for protecting their users' data. Go through the questions, let me know what you think. Yeah. Actually, it's again very high. Waiting? Oh, sorry, we're still waiting with the second question. Sorry. So some people maybe have seen the answer already. Let's go. Cool. It's again interesting high numbers. 67% of consumers are more open to grant their permission to use if they trust the brand. That means if you have a high trust level associated with your brand because you share proactively, you are transparent, you invest into the customer's trust, then they share more data. And this data is something that you can then use to optimize your campaigns. 85% of the consumers, which is a very high number actually, say that knowing a company's privacy policy before making a purchase is important. Now, who is reading all the privacy policies all the time? Yeah, very good. A lot of users are actually, so this is a big thing. So you always think, okay, people skip this probably because they never want to see the content. No, they do care. And they want to see that this is made properly, transparent, easy to understand, so that they can trust you as a brand and are willing to share the data with you, making sure that they follow you along, that they come back, and that's why this is so, so important. And 53% of consumers only make purchases and use digital services after making sure the companies are protecting their data. And also knowing that they do this with all the time and they can trust and come back. So, what are consumers telling us with that? Be transparent about how you handle their users' data. Be proactive in respecting their choices and also enable them to change their choices, adapt their preferences, and get control about what do they actually share and when to take this back. And then make it easy to do that, right? Because it's all about a good user experience on how you do that. Do this across the whole journey so that you always think you are under control. And that's what we are focusing on. What happens when this is failing? So if you're not able to build up this trust, this is also super impactful for your business because they consider other brands, your competitors. 46% of consumers often or always consider a competitor brand if they have the feeling that they cannot trust you on how you use their data. And 56% of B2B buyers do that if it's unclear how you use the data and what you're doing with this, how you send it along to other toolings, to third parties. And then if you look into millennials and Gen Z, also more than 50% is looking exactly into this. So it's becoming more and more important. But let's look into how does actually the privacy journey look like? Because we often talk, especially in marketing, when we optimize flows, and optimize websites and applications, we look into the customer journey, right? And follow the customer along the journey. We have different conversions. How does that look like from a privacy angle? So you might know this concept of a customer journey map. We have this here for a typical e-commerce setup. So let's say, first step, you land on the website and you get your first impression, your consent banner. And then you understand, okay, what is this brand about? What can I do here? That's your first few seconds and few minutes on the user on your website. And what is here? When it's not well, it's an unclear consent banner. It's data collected prior consent. I see that things are happening, that my data is already shared, but I was not asked for it. So I directly get a bad impression. And then as a next step, I'm looking into, okay, let's add something from the products into the cart. I'm exploring different products. In the best case, I'm getting some suggestions on what should I buy based on my preferences. If I'm a recurring user, you probably know what I want to have. But here, it's also sometimes super scary. Why does the website know actually about me that I want to have this product? Let's say, I don't know, I want to buy a new computer, and now I'm getting the brand that I looked into before, suggested over others, so I don't get the full feature list. And then I don't have any control on how to change that. So how can I influence what is actually suggested to me? Afterwards, I'm getting to checkout. So I get here to the point where I need to share all my personal data with you, right? I need to give my billing address, need to add my credit card details, my name, my email address. So you get everything from me. Do I trust you? Often you have not good privacy policies. We talked about this before. Users look into this. You don't understand what's going on. Way too many things are shared. So I don't trust the brand. Do I want to do the checkout? Do I want to give them my data? No. And then afterwards, we look into customer match, retargeting activities. I do get so many ads from you as a company. I have not consented to this. This is going south because you don't want that as a consumer. That's a bad one, right? Let's look into the other side, a good example on how you get into a point where the user feels engaged, they feel like respected, and they get the right suggestions from you and the right ads. A good consent banner, first impression. We talked about this already, and we will deep dive into the details. A clear, compliant consent UI, user experience, making it easy to understand. Do it contextual. Give the user the information on what do I do with the data? What do you get from it? We will look into examples for this later. And properly block everything that is not consented to. Anything that is not essential, make sure that it's properly blocked so that nothing is going out before I gave my consent as a user. And then looking to the next step, we talk about preferences. And here we're talking about proper preference management, asking for the preferences that a user has, and then give them the right recommendations. And give them the ability to always change that, to configure, hey, I am today interested in a different brand for my computer. And do this in a very transparent way. And then we get to the checkout, and here it's about proper privacy policy that is something that you like to read and understand, and it's not only a lot of legal words next to each other. And then afterwards, make sure that you have the right infrastructure in place to build your audiences and retarget your customer. Make sure that you have a proper implementation with, for example, Google Customer Match. Make sure that you send the right data to third parties and do this in a compliant, privacy-friendly way. And then it's all about the setup, right? It's all about how do you connect all your different tools together to make sure that data is flowing the right way, in a compliant way, and you have always the information of consent in there, and make sure that it can always be updated so that the user can also afterwards come to you and say, hey, you know what, I want to change that, or I want to update my preferences to get better ads shown to me. And that's how you build a good privacy journey for the user. And in the end, what you will get out of it is happier customers and better performing campaigns. So we talked about 4 main parts here, and that's also what we as Usercentrics usually offer in terms of products. So we have the consent management, so the first impression on your website, a proper consent banner, what we're offering with our products from a consent management perspective. Then preference management is all about collecting users' preferences, getting their consent for zero first-party data, making sure that they can change it, having the right center, and that's what we call Usercentrics preference management. And then privacy policy, doing this in a compliant way, easy to understand, and easy to set up. Probably everybody has this already from you, hopefully. If not, please invest. But we offer a privacy policy generator where you can do with a few clicks an easy privacy policy to make sure that it's easy to read and understandable and compliant. And the last point, we have another masterclass in 2 hours on this point, is server-side tagging. Try to go from a client-side perspective to a server-side perspective and make sure that you have full control about what data is shared with third parties. Let's look into the first part, consent banner, and I have a little video here for you. Have a look.
In business, you only get one chance to make a great first impression. Observe the panic in his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. Shh. He's about to bolt. Watch. And there he goes. You're not getting that customer back. Your website is your waiting room. Make a great first impression with Usercentrics customizable cookie banners and start building trust through privacy-led marketing. Get started for free at usercentrics.com.
So that's our little dentist campaign, talking about first impressions matter, trust at first sight, in the first 0.05 seconds. And what have we seen here? So if you have a bad content banner that is not connected to your brand, not building up the trust, you have a lot of issues that are appearing, then this has a negative impact on your customer, and the customer might churn directly or will not come back later. So here it's all about configure it the right way, make it fitting to your brand, build up the trust, show it's part of the journey, be very clear about what is happening, give the right details, and that's how you build a proper content experience in the beginning. Be proactive about it, make sure that it's very transparent so that the user can navigate through what is happening here, why do I use it, what do I get out of it, and make sure that you gather the content in a clear way, and obviously in the background, make sure that you have it implemented the right way. In the end, with our content management platform, with Usercentrics, the focus is on simplifying this whole process. Make it easy to install a content banner, make it easy to get to a compliant version out of it, and comply with different privacy laws. Because in the end, it's about the user. So it's not about you as a company only, it's also where's the user located, what kind of privacy laws are affecting the user, making sure that it's always built up for this, and make the connection to your brand. And then build up the right blocking mechanism so that you don't load anything prior content. And with this tool, you build up trust through transparency with your user, and they follow you along the journey in the privacy perspective. Second product that we will talk about in detail also is preference management. So here, it's about collecting preferences. When we look into content management, then it's usually about getting content to services that are sending data around about cookie content, and it's all about third-party content, basically. And when we talk about preference management, then this is about zero first-party data. So data that is actively shared with you or that you track yourself on your customers, on your website, and then giving them the possibility to interact with this. So it's basically preferences that you collect in a form on, let's take email, for example. This is something we have for a long time, email preferences, asking for, hey, do you want to get the email campaign? And then you modify what kind of emails you get, right? For what is your interest? And that's the kind of preference that you can get out of it. It could also be something around sharing your data with offline conversions afterwards. We have customer match as a big topic when you do Google Custom Match, for example. And here you want to bridge the gap, and you want to collect zero first-party data to build proper conversions in a more privacy-friendly in a controlled way. We do have one addition in there. We call that Audience Unlocker. It's basically a customer match integration with Google. So you collect the content for sharing data, your email address basically, with customer match later as a conversion, and collect this content and giving the customer the ability to always change this content again. So it's basically in your forms, collecting this, saving this as a preference, and then sending it to Google with customer match afterwards to do proper retargeting. And that's all connected in our preference management setup. And with this, you can focus on zero first-party data and how to connect it to all the systems that you're using. So we're talking about CRM systems, marketing automation platform, and any kind of systems that you want to send data to, and collect all your preferences at one place. That is then sending this around in an integrated way with all the tools that you're using, and give the customer always the possibility to come back and change it. And the last two things, we'll just quickly talk about it. We have privacy policy generation. So here it's all about generating the right privacy policy, make it easy to read, easy to understand, and get it in a compliant way. And it actually takes 5 minutes to install. And when we talk about server-side tagging, if you're interested in this, I would recommend that you join us in 2 hours to the masterclass on server-side tagging, because here it's all about how do you control all the data that you're sending to third parties in a easy way to host a server-side tagging container and make sure that you are in control of what data you're sending somewhere else. And this is like the whole change in the market. So we go from a client-side direction to a server-side direction, and making sure that you can manage more, get the right data, and send it to third parties, and manage all the data flows that you have, which is way easier and gives you way more benefits in a server-side world. And with that, let's jump into a few details, and I have Max here with us today, who is a very trusted partner of ours, and he will guide you a little bit through the details on how to go into content management and preferences.
All right. Thank you, Eike. I think we already learned a lot about trust and how trust impacts the data that you're collecting and the revenue that you can drive from an online business. Actually, I'm very happy to talk about this topic now as well, because when Eike told us about this masterclass, we said, okay, we have a lot of great examples from our projects with clients where we did some changes to the way how they are handling consents and which actually improved their business in any specific way. So, for example, we are doing consent management setups most of our time, and like one of the most common questions is, how can I increase the consent rate of my consent banner? And as we learned, trust starts with a consent banner, and the consent rate, which is directly connected to the marketing data that you're allowed to use, is directly connected to the trust that you get. So having a proper consent management is the core requirement for building trust and for collecting data in a compliant way. The interesting things that you need to keep in mind is that there are 3 core components that you should think of when building a proper consent management on your website or on your mobile app. The first one is transparency. That means you have to explain what data you want to collect and for which purpose. This does not necessarily mean that you have to tell your user every detail of how your marketing team handles data, but you have to tell your users what is collected and how their user journey is impacted by that. Be transparent and explain what you're doing. Most users will understand that, and as we learned, most users are also interested in that. Also, keep in mind that most of your users are maybe interested in that, but are not techies. So if you're using things, or if you're writing about stuff like, hey, we are using specific 1P data to retarget you for specific audience tracking, this is probably not what your users can understand. Be transparent, but do it in an understandable way. We see a lot of consent banners where there's like a big legal text in the first layer, so in the actual banner itself, that no one of the users can actually understand, and as a result, they will decline, because if I don't understand something, I will not consent to it. So be clear in your wording, in your understanding. Also, make sure that the CMP matches the design of your website. It sounds like something that is self-explaining. Of course, the banner should look like a native part of your website, but when our clients are asking us, what can I do to improve my consent rate, this is the #1 thing that you need to change. If your consent banner does not look like a native part of the user journey, but as some kind of weird artifact that is sitting on top of your content, users will make sure to click it away, and they will click it away by using the deny button. They will not interact with the actual content in the consent banner. So keep these 3 core components in mind when you're building a consent banner on your website. Let's take a look at an example of one Usercentrics customer who does all of these 3 things very, very well. This is the consent banner of About You. They would like to highlight a couple of things that they are doing pretty good here. The first is the branding. You can see that they are using the colors from their brand colors in their consent banner. You see the yellow, which is like also part of the top menu. You see the black, that is part of their buttons. They're using the same fonts. They are using the same styling for the buttons and for the layout of the banner. And they're using the logo. Using a logo in the CMP is like a very, very, very simple change. It's very easy to implement that with Usercentrics, but just adding the logo can improve your consent rate by around 5%. So that's like a very easy change that you can do. The second thing, what I just mentioned, clarity, make the text understandable. As you can see here in the headline, the brand says, hey, it's about you, your personalized shop. You we want to improve your experience in our shop. So for that, we need to collect, or we want to collect some personal data from you. We want to use cookies to improve the user experience that you have. Be clear, make it understandable, and highlight the benefit, highlight the value that the user gets from accepting the things in the consent banner. Also, you see the banner is not blocking the actual website. It's a bit tricky if you should use a banner that is blocking the website or not. So if the user should be able to browse on the website without interacting with the consent banner. But at least for our customers, using a non-blocking system like this one here improves the acceptance rate. So let the users visit the website, let the users check what they want to check, and if they are actually engaged and want to start a real user journey, they will interact with the cookie banner and they will have a more, let's say, positive mindset about your brand, and they will trust you, and they are more likely to click the accept, or in this case, the OK button. And last but not least, pretty self-explaining as well, but make sure that the language is working as expected. A lot of you guys are probably working on websites or mobile apps that are targeting international clients. So you have websites that are available in multiple languages. Make sure that the language of the banner actually matches the language of your website or the language of your user. Best case would be both. Again, it's pretty self-explaining, but around 20 to 30% of the banners that we see on the internet are not doing that well. They are using like an English banner on a German website or opposite, for example. And if your users cannot understand what is stated in the banner, they will definitely not accept it. So make sure that the language is working as expected and provide an option to change the language if the users are, for example, want to change the language to understand it a little bit better. Also in the second layer, so the second layer is basically the so-called settings panel, or the layer that opens if a user wants to get more information about a specific consent service. There are a lot of things that you should care about when setting that up. Keep the 3 core principles in mind: be transparent, be understandable, and match the design of your website. About you, categorize the different services into single categories, but use not like generic name like marketing or analytics stuff. They are highlighting the benefit. They are saying we want to use personalized ads and content. They're explaining why they want to do that, and they're showing the vendors that they're using to do that. So make it clear and understandable, and provide granular options. Not only on the category level, do not let your users accept or deny all marketing stuff on your website. Give them the choice what they want to use and what they don't want to use. Second thing, you can have the best and most transparent and best looking banner, but it won't bring you any benefit if it's not working as expected. If we are starting with new clients, around 60 to 70% already have a consent banner that looks maybe well and that seems like it would actually has an impact on the data that is collected, but a lot of the time this is not the actual case. So in this example, you see I've installed like a little browser extension that tells me if a tracker is installed on the website. And I have marketing and analytics cookies disabled, but that extension will still show me trackers that are used on the website. And of course, if your users will see that on your website, it's not only like a privacy violation, it's also something that will decrease the trust. If the user understands that you're not respecting their choice, they will not give their acceptance or their consent for future options on your website as well. We just talked about the banner, which is like the first thing that you see on the website. But as you might know, not every user will accept in the first place. And this is fine. We see a decreasing consent rate, especially in Europe and even more especially in Germany. But if a user declines in the first place, you have not necessarily lost him forever in terms of data collection. You can use contextual consent. What is contextual consent? You're basically asking the user for approval, for consent, at a specific stage in the user journey where you actually need it. The most common example that some of you might know is like a blocker or overlay that sits on top of a specific content element. Things like YouTube videos or Google Maps embeddings that are somehow that are blocking specific, or where the overlay is blocking these components when the user have not given consent. And you can use these overlays to ask for consent at a later stage. So instead of just removing the video or the map from your website, you can use these kind of overlays to ask for a consent. In the best case, do it in a simple and understandable way. The same 3 core principles also apply here. If you do it more understandably and if you highlight the benefit that the user gets out of that, you will get more acceptance. Another example is that especially targets the value gain. We have a client that has a recommendation widget in their e-commerce store. You might already know that. Eike also told about that. You like click through specific products and the shop wants you to show comparable products or products that you might be also interested in. Of course, this personalization is only allowed with consent because you're using personal data to do that. But it also brings a benefit to the end user. So for example, in that case, this e-commerce store is selling clothes, and when a specific piece of clothing is not available, they want to show comparable pieces based on the interests of the user. So based on the previously purchased or previously visited product pages, they want to show similar pieces. And if the user does not accept the cookie banner in the first place, they're using contextual consent for that as well. So they're showing that widget and they're saying, hey, we have proper alternatives for that product that you might be interested in, but we need your consent because we need to process a little bit of your data to do that, to actually show you the things that you're interested in. So this is another example of how to properly use contextual consent. Explain the value. This is important. Very easy example for the value as well. See these 2 disclaimers. The first one is asking you if if you're allowing to, or if you want to give the data to the brand for marketing and to increase their revenue. The second one is asking you to give your data to provide a better experience and to improve your user journey. At the end, both of these disclaimers are asking you to share data, but one highlights the value that you get as a user out of it, and the other one clearly not. So keep this in mind when you're writing these consent models. If it's a cookie banner or contextual consent, explain the value and you will get consents out of that. This is especially helpful when you want to provide or when you want to get consents for things that are more connected to actual preferences than cookies. For example, this is also an example that you might have already seen in online shops. You click on a specific product, it's not available, and you see an input field where you can put in your email address, and you think, I don't want to give you my email address just because I'm interested in that one product. But if you're offering the customer different options for what kind of emails you're sending them, for example, only sending them an email if the item is back in stock or back in the size you need, or if the price is lowered by a couple of %, then your users are much more likely to give you that consent. So do not only give them one option when it comes to consenting, give them multiple and break it down into several granular options. More users will be likely to select at least one of these, compared if you just have like one input field that says, put your email in and we will send you newsletters and notifications and marketing emails and all of that stuff. When we are talking about contextual consent, I said that it can drive the actual numbers of data or of users that have somehow consented in the user journey. In Germany, we have an average consent rate in the cookie banner of around 75%, which is, to be honest, by far the lowest consent rate in the whole world because the Germans are very into privacy. But contextual consent can improve that. If you still have your quiz open or if you want to reopen it again, please do just a suggestion. If you're using contextual consent to achieve something, what would you think is the average consent rate that you get by using contextual consent? It's actually 98%. If you're highlighting the value of something and be transparent and clear about the data that is collected, much more users are willing to share their data. So this example is from such a like a similar e-commerce store where we are using exactly this strategy. And out of the users that are basically seeing that contextual widget, 98% will actually consent and are willing to give their data. As Eike already mentioned, doing all of this stuff is needed because you are responsible for the data that is collected by your users. Keep that in mind. You are not handling with data that belongs to your business. You're handling with, or you're working with data that belongs to the users of your business. Do contextual consent, improve your consent banner, but keep in mind that you need to describe everything properly in your privacy policy, that you need to respect users' choices and actually make sure that your systems are working as expected. So if someone does not consent, you cannot use the data, and make sure that this actually works on a technical level. And control third-party vendors on your website. This is even more and more important when it comes to stuff like remarketing and advertising, because most of modern e-commerce systems will have trackers of 10, 20, 30 different vendors on the website. And your users might trust you as a brand, but they are not trusting Google and Meta and others. So make sure that you control the data that is shared with these providers and be transparent about what is shared and what's not. And again, your users will be much more likely to consent to that. Last slide for today is just like a quick view in the future, because we always get asked, what do you think will be the future of cookie banners if users are more into privacy and are less likely to accept cookie banners and are annoyed by that? How could the future look like? And we are just working on a use case with one client where we are trying to use a tracking system or an advertising system that does not rely on the consent banner in the first place. So you open a website, you start your user journey, you do the things you want to do, you see the products you want to see, you put something in the cart, you start the checkout process, and just in the purchase step, we are asking you for consent to share the purchase data with advertising vendors to improve the experience in the shop or to recommend you similar products. And this is how, at least I would imagine, the future could look like. So not using cookie banners in the first place, but relying on contextual consent and similar consent or similar approvals in the user journey instead of just putting everything in the consent banner in the beginning. And I think that's it for today. Do you have any questions about that? So, willst du?
Great presentation, thank you. When it comes to the future of consent management, so to your last slide, I mean, when you do not track during the customer journey and only in the final stage ask, can we use that data, are you still able to do a customizing of the customer journey? I mean, do you have the approval to use the data and then finally you deny it? So I see it a little bit paradoxical.
It depends a little bit. So in that actual project or in that use case that we were just testing out, it actually works by collecting only unpersonalized data during the user journey. So basically doing tracking that does not rely on consent, because you're not collecting anything personal. You're not using any kind of cookies or browser storage for that. And in the last place where you actually need to share personal data, so for example, the email address with advertising platforms like Google and Meta, there you are just asking for the consent. So you're splitting the tracking up between things you don't need consent for because it's not personalized and things you need consent for. But if a user just browses on your website, there are solutions to do that also without consent because you don't need personal data for it.
Yeah, the main topic that you want to improve is you want to iterate on working on the journey, right? It's like going away from you implement a consent banner as a one-off solution and you just like show everything in the beginning and the customer doesn't understand what's going on. It's about getting back to this and adding the value, right? And experimenting on what can I improve of the journey to get more trust and also ask for what is important to me, right? Usually when you have a normal consent banner implementation, you ask for, I don't know, for 60 different services that you've implemented. Is that really the same important level for you? Probably not, right? You have like a few things that are important for your attribution and your main conversion tracking, and that's what you want to have, right? And the rest is something that is maybe coming later. Maybe it's only on one page that you have, right? That only a couple of customers are visiting, and that's what you want to optimize for.
It's a little bit of a follow-up question to what you just asked. Just imagine you have a free trial and customers are now changing emails and trying to trick the system. So if you don't know that the same customer is now coming back to your website under 10 different emails, but with the same IP address or some other things that you would be tracking, then you wouldn't know.
Very interesting question. Do you want to start, or should I?
Go for it.
Okay, so actually, I think that's a very interesting use case, because I think we need to differentiate here between data that you're collecting for marketing purposes and data that you're collecting for other parts of your business. So for example, if you're saying you're offering a free trial and part of the terms and conditions of that free trial is that you need to give your email address or your phone number because everyone should just get one free trial, for example, that's, in my opinion, a little bit different, and that's not really connected to the data that you're collecting for marketing purposes. It might still make sense to think about, do I need to collect personal information to offer you that free trial? But if you have a product that is relying on that, for example, because customers need to log in and you don't want to give like any random customer 20, 30, 40 different trial accounts because you want to sell your tool or sell your service or whatsoever, then I think you will always need to collect some kind of personal information to make sure that you don't have this specific use case. When it comes just to tracking or marketing, there are possibilities to do that without personal data by just, for example, counting how many users are coming to a specific landing page that you created for a specific campaign. So you don't necessarily need to share campaign data with an advertiser if you have a landing page that you have just created for one campaign. You also have that information in your system without any kind of personal data there.
Yeah, I think just like to add, I think there are two topics. One is also trust is like a two-way street, right? So that's what you also want to enable. So work very heavily, not only on the privacy side, but investing into trust with the customer. So, and focusing on the value so that they also are less likely to trick you. I think that's one important learning. And I think the other one is when we talk about not asking for consent to say at the first time for everything, it's still what you see, the more engaged a user is on a website, so going more down the funnel, the more likely they are to consent to something, right? Because they're more engaged. And when you sign up for something for a trial, then you're usually at a point where you're already very engaged, right? So that's a moment where you could already start enriching your consent decision that you want to get, because you have a higher engaged user, which leads to a better conversion on consent.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's a very good point, especially if we remember the comparison between the 75% in the initial cookie banner and the 98% in a contextual consent that is part of an already engaged session. I think there it would be, like a user would be much more likely to give out their email address when they are signing up for a free trial or something like that, instead of just doing it at the beginning of the journey.
I have a question about the numbers you used in the slides. For example, 85% of consumers think knowing a company's privacy policy before purchasing is important. Yes, people actually read privacy policies. Where do you pull that number from?
I think there should be, isn't it there? Yeah, that's the same study on the others. We can share the slides actually. There is a link on a study which is actually going in this direction, yeah. I think it's this one. So there's actually a study exactly on this from a combination of Adobe and McKinsey doing a survey on that and showing that this is actually something that is happening. And we also do see this from when we look into the privacy policy generator product that we have, that this is something that users are engaging with. So it is something that matters. You were first, I think.
Just a question, just going back on the last slide again, sorry. For example, I have like 30,000 website traffic, but because we have a high value in purchase, so let's say a booking is about 2,000 to 3,000 euros, so we only have maybe 200 purchases on the website. That would reduce my capabilities of seeing what are my users are doing on the website. So putting it all the way to the back would actually massively shorten my data. So I would have like really problems to interpret it and to retarget, because if they are on my website and they just, oh, well, I have to need to discuss this with my husband, if we are going to go on a trip or not, and then they go away, and then I cannot retarget them because they never accepted the cookies. So, and I have a really high actual acceptance. So I have like 83% already without this all. Yeah, so that's my question.
Yeah, maybe as a comment on this. So take it with a grain of salt and focus on finding the right use case for you, because it is different from the different types of websites, right? So, and you also have a different goal. When you take, for example, a typical e-commerce shop, like a small e-commerce shop, right? Then the main goal is to get to a purchase. So you basically, or the first thing is you add something to a basket so that you can convert this customer, and that's your main goal. And it's less maybe the focus on retarget the customer, because the customer needs to think about it for a longer time, right? That will be a different use case and also different user journey. So that's why we are focusing on look into the journey that your user have, and then optimize exactly for this and ask for the right things at the same at the right time. And it's not that you should not ask anything in the beginning, right? It's more about structuring your focus on where do you want to get the right consent level, with a combination of value that the user gets out of it.
Maybe like just an example, I don't know if that would work for your business, but if you're saying that you don't have that many like purchase conversions per day with like just 200, 300 whatsoever, if you're somehow relying for so-called soft conversions for remarketing, so people putting some things in the basket or people are viewing a specific product page for more than 5 minutes or whatsoever, that could be also a point in the user journey where you can implement a contextual consent. So something like, hey, we saw you put that into the basket, but you have not like started the purchase journey. Then you're asking him, hey, are we maybe allowed to send you a 5% discount per email if you're willing to give us your email here? Or are we allowed to show you like comparable offers through our recommendation engine, because we saw that you have not like continued your user journey. So something like that could also work. Doing it for the purchase is like just one common example for the typical e-commerce store, but the idea is, instead of doing everything at the beginning, spread it across the user journey, and ask for specific consents at the time where you actually need them and not in the beginning.
We spoke a lot about consent. Are there cases where we don't need consent, although we are asking for personal data?
I mean, I'm not a lawyer here, so I have to be a little bit careful of what I'm saying, but the GDPR has like specific use cases or specific exceptions when you are allowed to collect personal data. And consent is just one of these use cases. Consent is basically the thing that you need to obtain when you don't have another good reason to do it. But there are also things like, to be honest, I don't know how it's like how the English word for that is, but if you're like need to fulfill a contract, for example, which is part of an e-commerce purchase, the user does not explicitly need to consent that you're collecting their home address or their shipping address to send you a product. It's part of the contract that you need to fulfill. So in this, basically everything what we discussed right here applies to the consent or to the personal data that you're collecting. Mostly that cannot be qualified through these other exceptions in GDPR.
Yeah, and it's always, I mean, always check with legal team. We are not giving legal advice here, but I mean, there's like essential services and non-essential. And usually essential is something that you look into what is really essential to load a website, for example, and you still would collect personal data. If you take the IP address, for example, and use this as a PII, then this is already personal data collected, but I mean, that's how the internet works, right? That's why this usually goes to essential, and then you can go through all the use cases and see, does that work as essential or not? And then you.
Yeah, I've sort of a methodical question that goes a little bit back to the beginning of the presentation, where you said transparency is helping you a lot with obtaining consent. How would you methodically approach it if you heavily rely on IAB TCF purpose descriptions? Yeah,
good question. Yeah, so transparency, so the concept of transparency and why this is important is because you, by showing the right information in the right way, you gain the trust and you get more consent. If we talk about frameworks and also things that you have to do and that you have to show, it's getting more challenging, right? That's one of the items that we all in the industry also need to work on, right? On how we make things easier to understand. And I think, for example, privacy policy is an easy thing because usually you just like copy the same kind of legal snippets next to each other, and nobody's really asking the question on how to make this easier to understand. When we talk about purposes for vendors, I think it's a good thing and something we need to experiment on how to make this also easier to understand, especially if you have a lot of vendors, because then it's a lot of information, and I see the point.
I mean, I think that's a question that we should ask the IAB, right?
Do that as well, yes. But I can take this into the next discussion with them, yeah.
But like maybe just one small thing that you could do is to explain why you need to list 200 vendors in your CMP, because you are relying on advertising, and this is how the framework works. Because like at the end, no one, like everyone who's non-technical and even most of the techies out there will not understand how a TCF CMP works and why you have all of these vendors. So maybe you could at least like add information about why it looks like that and what your decision or what the impact of your decision is.
At the beginning, you presented that the language should match the website. So does that suggest that the Usercentrics offers the different languages or the terms of service in the different languages? Or the consent in the different languages?
Sorry. Don't quote me on it, but I think we have, does somebody know, 46, 50, 60 plus? Perfect, thank you. 60 plus languages that you get all the translations of the banner, and then it's basically, that's what Max said, you could either go for deciding what the language is to make sure that it matches your websites, and that depends a little bit on how you do language handling in general. So if you, for example, say that you always have a standard language that you show, I would always match also the banner to it so that you have the match of both and give the user the choice to change it again. So if for some reason your website is always by default German and the customer needs to change it themselves, I would also start the same with a banner. While a more dynamic approach would be always better to identify the language of the user. So that's something that we do automatically based on the geolocation the user's in, and then show the right language. And then you want to do this on pair with your website so that you have no breaks in the journey.
And you said that it would be good if it would be easier for the people to understand, but once you change the text to make it easier, then it might not fully cover the initial legal text. So then it would not be easy how to formulate it to be like legacy, privacy proof or legal proof, so to speak.
Yeah, so if you're changing the text, yes, that's something that you need to be careful with, right? So the easier you do language, the harder it also gets to match legal requirements when it comes to legal wording. I see that point, and I think that's the right discussion to have and that we need to have to make this better to understand, because in the end, and that's the problem, when we talk about concepts like consent fatigue, on people are just like clicking something because they don't even bother to read, that is an issue. And we need to think about how can we optimize that, because it's in the end then not helping, right? Because if the user's ignoring it because they don't understand, it's not fulfilling the right purpose, right? And that's what we need to work on. More questions?
On the last slide, I wonder how do you calculate the visitors or the users without placing cookies on the last slide? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So in that specific use case, this client is relying on tracking that is not based on cookies, but based on the user agent, because they don't have like 10,000 of concurrent users at a time. They like most of the time they have like 20, 30 different users on the page. And just by observing the user agent, they can differentiate between these 30 users. So they can see if if a user switches from page A to B to C to D, they can track the information. They see the page views. They see which pages are visited, with which products are visited, and what interactions these users are doing with their page. and then only for the conversion they are actually collecting the personal data. But this also really depends on your specific use case and on the scenario that you want to build here. So I have to admit that their setup is like very, very, very basic, very straightforward, because they are basically just collecting page views. This is all that they need for their analytics. But we also have similar clients who are relying on measurement methods like Google Consent Mode, or you're using more advanced tools like Matomo or something like that, that provides you with much more information than just counting page views for a user. So I would say it depends on the use case, but there are a lot of technical options to gather web analytics data that is not personalized and that is not relying on browser storage, because these are the two things that are basically blocking you from doing web analytics. Like most of the stuff that you want to collect is not actually personalized, but the way how it's collected makes you or requires a consent. But if you're changing the way how it's collected, you can actually do a lot of analytical stuff, not remarketing of course, but analytical stuff without consent as well.
Yeah, if you're interested in that, we do have a few partners that offer privacy-friendly analytics, where you basically do different options of tracking and that you also increase when you give consent. So you basically start with the basic tracking in the beginning and then increase the kind of tracking options that you have when consent is given. If you're interested, please reach out. We can definitely talk about that. Cool. More questions? There we go. Ah, very active. I like it.
You spoke about different drivers. I mean, for example, transparency, same language, trust, and so on, all drive the consent rate. What do you think about giving other advantages like gifts or even money or any other things like that? Does this drive consent? And I'm not sure if this is allowed.
So the first answer, it does definitely. The most common example is what you see on some publishers with the pay or consent model. So you're basically saying you need to, if you want to watch, or if you want to watch that video, if you want to read that article, you have to consent or you have to pay. So you're basically saying if you're consenting, you're saving $2.99, whatever. So that definitely works. The legal interpretation of that is a little bit difficult because the GDPR states that the consent must be freely given and not connected to any monetary advantage. There might be changes to that, interestingly, because this pay or consent model is currently observed by some of the authorities. But even if you're saying you're not giving them monetary advantages, I would say it's more about highlighting the value that you get out of the consent. So, for example, the use case that we had with give us your email address and we can send you a 5%, or we can send you a 5% discount, or give us your email address and we will send you a notification when we have a special offer for this product that you're currently looking for here. This has a huge impact on the amount of users that will actually give their email address for that. And similar things you can also do for, let's say, cookie consents. When you're saying, hey, we want to show you an interactive map that shows you where our next store is, please give us your consent to show you that interactive map. As we see, 98% of users will actually do that if they see the value and the benefit in that. There is still a small portion of the users that says, okay, I don't want to share my data. For example, with Google Maps, it's fine, we cannot change that, but most of the users just are annoyed by handing out their data for free without any advantages for them. And if you highlight and explain these advantages, you will get much more consent.
Yeah, I would say the main advice would be careful in terms of what you're choosing there, because it needs to be real value, right? And that's also what authorities are pushing for. If you look into the Digital Service Acts, there's a lot of focus on what you can do, what you should not do, right? And if it's going the direction of you are tricking, nudging the customer, then it's a problem. But if it's like real value that you give, I think it's always a good option.
Yep. All right, any more questions? That's great.
Perfect.
Yeah, just one small thing to mention. We also have a report for improving the consent rates for those who are still here. If you're interested in that, I think in the quiz there should be like a field where you can enter your email address, or you can just ask me or one of us here, and then we can share that report after the OMR with you.
Perfect, thank you.